So I'm going to start sitting on the block for a few minutes, just warming up shoulders, wrists, etc. But you'll notice that I'm deliberately sitting towards the end of my mat. So the reason for that is that when I finish, I'm going to leave the block at the back of the mat, ready in position for something else. So sit up nice and tall. Now the spine to lengthen out a little bit, just working to find a neutral pelvis, which generally you kind of know you've reached when the muscles in the back start to ease off a little bit. It doesn't become an effort to sit still and upright. Prior to that, when the pelvis is tilting in some direction, usually the back muscles engage, and then sitting for any length of time can become a bit painful. So this is a noteworthy practice because it reflects in our body later on during the day when we're standing in our natural posture or when we're sitting at desks. And the more that we're able to sit in a neutral plane, the more the balancing muscles along the spine are working, which is what they're there to do. They work 24/7 without getting tired. And the big muscles that had been used when you had poor posture get to have a rest. They're not activated. So it's energy consumption and also feel good factor. It's all good. Bring the hands together, interlace the fingers, just a wee wrist roll taking place. And at the same time, letting those hips relax, and knees drop down. And I'll take a little twist into the left. Introducing some rotation into the spine. Optional to look over the rear shoulder. If it's easy to do, then great. If not, just let the chin follow the heart. We'll come back to the center, take it to the opposite side. See how that feels in the body. Just making a little bit of a mental observation as to whether it feels similar on both sides. And then come back into the center again. I'm going to take the legs out in front and just move off the block and put that towards the very back of the mat in the center, and then take the hands behind. Now I'm going to lift the chest up towards the sky and allow myself to lengthen the toes away, roll the shoulders back, and then I'm going to start to flex my feet towards myself. Bring my hands back onto the thighs as I sit up tall, and then allow myself to bow the head around the spine. You feel that down the back and through the back of your legs as well. We'll come back up to a nice upright position. Take hands behind. Allow ourselves to point the toes away. The muscles are engaged in the thighs, rolling the shoulders back. This time we're going to lengthen the crown of the head, following the natural arch of the spine that we're creating. We'll come back into upright position. Take a breath, flex the toes towards us. Into that roundy back. Come back up to sitting, shoulders draw back, point the toes forwards and into the floor. Let the crown of the head gently back, so you shouldn't feel any pinching. And sitting up again, flexing the toes, round spine, and coming back up. So we'll move from there towards the front of the mat. We'll come up into plank. So we're stretching out one leg at a time. You want to be far enough up so when you push your leg back, you don't actually bump into the block, but you're going to take your feet as wide as the block anyhow in your plank position. I'm going to press the floor away, so we're starting to protract the shoulder blades. So the spine rounds a little bit. It's going to feel like the shoulders are rounding. The core's drawn in, we're pressing out through the heels. And then we'll bring the knees back down to the ground. Let's sit all the way onto the heels. Boot laces down. Slide the hands towards the toes. Let the head come to the floor if we can. If it doesn't reach, just bring your hands forwards, back underneath your forehead. Using our breath to stretch the lower back out. So we're breathing into the diaphragm. Feeling the breath moving into the lungs a little higher up. Hands forwards again. We'll move back into that plank position. We're going to tuck the toes of the right foot underneath the length now. And then we'll take the left hand out as well. So right leg, left hand. Press the left shin into the floor. Press the right hand down so we get that lift again. Feel the muscles across the chest, through the abdomen, down the legs and arms working together. We'll bring those hands and knees back down. Swap over to the second side. Activate pressing the shin into the floor. It's very easy to just sit in the knee. Let's try and spread the load a little bit. And then bring the hands back down again. And as the knees come back underneath, we'll spin the left foot off to the side. So pivoting on the left knee, bringing the left hand in a little bit. We'll take the right foot back and drop the heel in. We'll come into a baby side plank. Again, we're going to press down through that bottom hand, press down through the bottom shin, let the hips lift a little bit. And if you want to take it a little further, you lift the heel away from the floor so the toe is still on the ground. And if you want to take that even further, you'll then try and keep that rotation in the leg as you lift the foot to about the height of your hip. So 3 levels of work available to you. Take the one that feels good this morning. So if you have got the leg raised, hopefully you can feel your buttocks joining in. So bring the foot gently back down to the floor, back onto the hands and knees. And we'll build into the second side. So right hand comes in as the right foot goes out, left leg goes back. We drop the heel in, we press the hips forwards a little bit. To the left hand high. Just whatever needs to be brought in or moved out to feel like we're in line. Working on whether you want to take the leg high or not. And it's okay to do that just on one side and maybe not on the other side if you don't feel quite so confident through the wrist and shoulder maybe for balancing, or perhaps you've got a knee issue. You don't like taking all the weight onto the knee. Bring that foot down. Oops. Hand to the floor. Come back onto the hands and knees again. And we'll move into cat-cow. So draw the chest forwards, shoulders back, tilt the pelvis, draw the belly in even further, round through the spine. Move forwards. Exhaling out. And one more breath forwards. Going to neutral. Tuck the toes underneath. And move into down dog. So in the down dog, I'm going to use the block. So I want to be able to press my heels down onto the block itself. So still want the feet to be parallel, hands flat to the floor. And I'm going to see if I can have my heels on the block and then still stay on the ball of the foot, but just let the toes, the tip of the toes lift off the floor a little bit. So you start to get a little flex. Feel the muscles in front of the thighs and the shins activate a little more. And then the hips rise, drawing the belly in. And then we're going to walk the hands gently towards the feet. But before we do that, we're going to turn the feet out to about 45 degrees-ish with the heels still on the block. And allow the knees to bend. So sit back into a deep squat. It's your choice whether you have the fingers on the floor or bring the arms on top of the knees. I'm going to let the groins naturally open themselves out. Shoulders lift, forwards, tailbone down, so the spine gets nice and long or flat. We're trying to get away from that rounded spine sitting. Sit naturally as we can, or even with whatever limited mobility we have naturally in the ankles. I'm going to take a little breath from here, and I'm going to draw the feet back into parallel so that my knees follow as well. And then let the hands come forwards. Take a breath. We're going to stand into a forward fold. So the ribs are on the thighs as they come in. And once I've arrived and I feel stable, I'm just going to move the heels out enough so that I can have the feet either side on the floor of the block. I'll just move the block that last little bit in. And then I'm going to soften the knees into a squat. Take the hands forward so I come into a chair, drive through the legs and lift myself up. And then release. And shake it all out as I move up to the front of the mat. So I'll bring the feet back into parallel, hip distance apart, and towards the heart. Then exhale, forward fold. So taking the weight into the toes, a little softness into the knees. And I'll squat back into that chair pose again, draw the hands forwards, drive through the legs. Let the hands come out to the side, into the heart, taking the breath in, exhaling forwards. Softening the knees, ribs and thighs touch, hands lift, and then drive out slowly. Bring the hands down again. We'll take that one more time. Sitting as deep as we can. Driving out through the legs. Hands come wide, down to the sides. We'll step out to as wide as we can on the mat. Toes turning out 45 degrees. Heels are just sitting on the mat, so I've got a little bit of grip in case you've got slippery floor underneath you. And I'm going to let my bottom come down a little bit. I'm going to wriggle from side to side. And try and get the spine as upright as I can. So in this case, you want to actually tilt the tailbone backwards so that goes down and the belly comes in a little bit. As it happens, the knees will naturally want to draw in. So you can use the hands a little bit to help keep them nice and wide. So not putting any weight really into the hands, just using them to guide outwards. And then slowly drive through the legs to lift up. Bring the feet back in. Take a little breath. I'm going to move to my right side. Have the feet on the center line of the mat. Lengthen the legs out. Nice and wide. Bring myself into that star shape so that the hands are automatically the same level as the shoulders. And I turn my feet towards the front of the mat. So it's the back foot and the front foot both turning that direction. So I take myself over the front knee into warrior two. I'm still trying to keep the pelvis as much as possible in neutral. And activate pressing into the outside edge of the foot down to the floor and onto the inside ball joint of that foot as well. So everything's pressing down. You can take a little breath from here. Allow the front leg to slowly straighten. We start to take the body out. I'll bring the hand down onto the top of the shin rather than going down low, lifting the top arm up. Come back into my warrior two. Looking for the neutral pelvis and then going to pulse the front leg. Come back up into that star shape. Use my way down. Knee over ankle. If you look through the middle fingers of the hand, you get an idea of whether your knee is moving in the same direction as your arm is pointing, which hopefully should be forwards, front of the mat. And one more time coming down. Going to hold there, turn the palm on the front hand, bring ourselves into reverse warrior. So I'm going to drop the rear hand around the spine and try and bring the fingers to the front thigh. So wrapping the arm behind, taking the top arm up and over, and making sure that that back leg stays very active. So I want to press down through the foot until I can genuinely feel the thigh muscles lift and the buttocks start to lift a little bit as well. So not quite a clench, but definitely a lift. We'll bring ourselves back into warrior two. Inhale the hands high, and we're going to bring the hands down to the floor on the inside of this front foot. Take a little breath. Walk around the long side of the mat. Take a breath here. Allow ourselves to fall down. Inhale back up. Walk the fingers around to the front of the mat. You're going to step back into down dog. Come forwards into plank. Roll over the toes. Let the knees come to the floor. Untangle the toes, sit back into child's pose. Exhaling out. Inhale back up to all fours. Neutral spine, toes underneath. Back into our down dog. We'll take the right leg high to scissor. Bring the foot back down. And then to plank. Knees to the floor. Sit back into child's pose. And then up again. All fours, neutral spine. Tuck the toes underneath. Into down dog. Put the left leg up. Into scissor. And bring the foot down. Into plank. Knees to the floor. Sitting back into child's pose. Inhaling up. All fours, we tuck the toes underneath, move into down dog. And walk the hands towards the toes. Sort of forward fold. Softening the knees a little. Hands under the hips, we'll lift up. Shake it all out, walk up to the front of the mat. And take our big step to the left. Inhale the arms out wide. Turn the toes to the front of the mat. So we can move into our warrior two. Just taking a little time to connect with that back foot, pressing it down through 3 points of contact. Getting the little bit of a lift in the buttock on that rear leg as you press the foot down. Straighten the front leg slowly as we did before and come into the triangle pose. So lean forwards, hand stays high on the shin, top arm lifts up. Your choice of looking to the floor, which is the easiest proposition. Looking to the side, which takes a little bit more balance. Or taking the eyes and the head slightly towards the ceiling. So there's your peripheral view of the floor. This feels the most exposed. Challenges the balance to the highest degree. Soften the front knee. Come back into our warrior two. Take a little breath. Repulse. And sink. And pulse. And sink. Again, as we come forwards into that front knee, keep working into the back leg. Still feel this sense of lifting up through the thighs, into the groins, into the buttocks. So this is a very deliberate, slow movement with breath. Back into that warrior two position and begin to move into our reverse warrior. So bringing the hand behind, top arm up, extending it over, keeping the bend in the front knee, deliberately conscious of that back leg pressing down, so it's not a sleepy leg, it's very much wide awake, possibly more than I am this time of the morning. come back into our warrior two. Float the hands high and bring them down onto the inside of this front leg. Walking the fingers around. Turn the toes in. Taking a breath. Fold it down as we exhale. Inhale up. Walk the fingers through to the front of the mat and step it back into our down dog. Go forwards into plank. Roll over the toes, knees to the floor and sit down into child's pose. Exhale, go to the floor. Inhale back up into a neutral spine, so the shoulders go back, flat back, and then tuck toes underneath, we lift into our down dog. Take the right leg high into scissor. Try and lengthen out through the leg. Bring the foot down to the floor. Move into plank. Back onto the knees. Into our child's pose. Inhaling up. All fours. Neutral spine. Shoulders roll back. Toes tucked under. Move into our down dog. And take the left leg to the sky. Bring the foot to the ground. Move into plank. Knees to the floor. Sit back. Dog. As we come back up. And walk the hands to the toes, just as we did before, into our forward fold. And we'll bring the hands onto the hips, soft knees and a flat back to lift up. We get to shake it all out as we come up to the front of the mat. I'm just going to turn a little bit side as we're going to take tree pose for balance. We'll find something to focus on that's ahead of us. Bring the toes together so there's a little gap for the heels. And shift the weight into my left leg. Press the whole of the leg down into the floor. Right heel lifts from the ground and comes onto the ankle of the left leg. Toes move out to the side. Square the hips. Take a little breath. And slide foot onto the shin and the calf. See how that feels. And then if you feel to have the balance this morning, I want to take the heel into the groin, I can do. Release out of that. And feet to the floor. Cross over to the second side. Heel lifts. Let the knee move to the side, square the hips. Decision on whether we want to come high or low once we've taken a moment with the foot on the shin and the calf. Sometimes it's actually easier to have the heel higher than it is lower. Because that's just counterlevering limbs and joints a little bit more effectively. Okay, so if you want to come high, you can do. And release out of that as well. So just shaking the ankles out. Going to have the feet about hip distance apart. Bring the hands onto the front thigh. Slowly hinge forwards. Let the hands run down. thighs, down the shins, over the feet, and then taking the hand underneath, one foot at a time, so that the palm is being stood on with the feet, the back of the hand, and the wrist is getting pressed lightly into the floor. Once I'm in position and the head is relaxed, and press into the feet to lift the hips up a little more. Just to open the back of the legs out a fraction. If there's any significant tug in the lower back when you do this, then you've pushed a little more than you need to into the hamstrings. It's pressing down into the feet that gives it a little bit more finesse and more control and avoids lifting too rapidly. So just allow yourself to soften and think about feet again. Try to avoid connecting into the hamstrings and activating them. Press down and let yourself lift as naturally as you can. Good time to draw the belly in. Try and relax the shoulders. Lift out of that. Again, 1 foot at a time, just coming out. Taking a little breath, and we'll bring the hands gently onto the hips to lift up. Zigzag the toes back in. So it's just a momentary pause with hands in towards heart. Letting the blood flow from your heart back into your body, and let your brain and your heart kind of work out where it wants to put the blood. Okay, I'm going to take a little breath and start to soften the knees over the toes. Shift the weight into the left leg. Now rise the right knee and come into equal pose. I'm going to wrap the foot around. Take the arms out nice and wide. I'll bring the right arm across first. Left arm over. Bring the elbows, bring the palms together. Sit back a little deeper. Spine long, belly in. And then we'll release out of that. We'll come into the second side. So again, just take a little time. Hands into the heart. Soften the knees. Find stillness first. Then load into the right leg. Start to bring the left leg up. Wrap it round when you feel ready. Let the arms out. Left arm. Right arm over top. Elbows bend. Arms come together. Sit down a little lower. And shake that all out. Turning back towards the front of the mat for me, feet are hip distance apart, hands high. Into the heart as I exhale forwards. Down to the floor. Take a little breath. Just step back into my down dog. Forwards into my plank. Knees underneath. And take cat-cow. So hopefully as all of the major joints have opened up, we can start to feel a little bit more depth in stretch in this cat-cow. On the lift, still gentle moving forwards. And we'll come back into a neutral spine and just take the feet out to the side and let ourselves move gently back into the middle of the mat. We'll just bring the block back in, underneath the bottom. Moving into Dandasana, so I bring the toes and heels together and flex the feet evenly towards me. So little toe, big toe, same distance from my body. Lengthen out through the heels. Sit up nice and tall. Hands out to the side, roll the shoulders back, press the sitting bones down. Crown of the head lifts. to lengthen the front thighs away from myself. So rather than drawing in and getting tighter, hopefully they feel like they're moving in the opposite direction a little bit. And then I'm going to release a little bit from there, bring the left foot underneath for a seated twist. Right foot across. And lift that left arm up and rotate around through. So I want to tilt the pelvis forwards a little bit to get the chest to lift up. Take the right hand behind. A little bit of counter levering with this left arm on the right leg at the front. I've got the furthest forward foot flat to the floor. And I'm trying to relax the bottom leg. So let yourself wiggle your toes on your foot under here. And see if you were, in fact, holding on a little bit where you didn't need to be. And we'll release from here and move that into the second side. So the legs go out first. Then we draw the right leg in, get happy with the knee pointing forwards. Make sure that leg is as close to the ground as we can. We draw the opposite foot in tight to the body so we can use the hand, aiming to get the foot eventually low to the floor and the knee high. Right arm lifts, we rotate round and tilt the pelvis forwards a little bit so we get a little bit more extension out of the spine. Wiggle the toes. Release, come back towards the front of the mat. Going to lift off of the block for a moment. Put that behind towards the very back of the mat. I'm going to use the hands to ease myself down. I'm going to take another rotation through the spine, but we're going to work it a little bit differently in that we're laying down. I'm going to shimmy the hips over to the left, let the legs down to the right, and just take the right hand and plop that across the thighs. Help with holding them down. So not pushing, just using the body weight of the legs and the arms to rotate around and try and keep the shoulders flat to the floor. Eyes looking towards the ceiling. The body lift up, shimmy into the opposite direction. Legs go down, arm comes across. Bring the knees high again and center. Bring the heels in towards the body. Hip distance apart, parallel. Move your head off of the block. So just bring that behind And then bring the hands down by the side of the body, arms facing down. Roll the shoulders underneath for a bit of bridge flow. You draw the belly in as we exhale, press down through the thighs. Move the knees forwards, let the hips lift, the buttocks away, and then rolling back down. So we're not going super high, working more into the legs, moving forwards and letting that kind of lever us up a little bit. Rolling back down. A nice smooth movement so you can feel all of the bones in your spine rippling up, lengthening. Imagine the gaps getting a little bit bigger in between the spine, the discs, and then rolling gently back down with control, pelvis to the floor. Exhale and lift. Roll. Bring yourself back down. We've got enough time for one more of those little lifts. And then mini bridge. And then we'll slide the heels out to the corner edges of the mat. And palms up towards the sky, let the hands move out a little further. And then as effectively as we can, wriggle and jiggle so that we can let everything sink in towards the mat. Begin to wiggle the toes and fingers. Let the wrists and the ankles begin to move as we breathe a little deeper. Allow that to manifest into a nice big stretch. Already slide the heels in. Trying to keep the feet in contact with the floor. So we disturb the spine as little as possible. Let the knees come in towards the body for a simple hug. We'll gently roll over onto our right side, taking a breath in. And using the hands on the exhale to press into the floor to lift back up. So smoothly negotiating back into a easy sitting posture. Sitting nice and tall. Hands in towards the heart, taking a breath in. And as we close the eyes, let the chin drop. Belly draws in. And we bow naturally to the floor to seal our practice. Inhaling, we lift. Eyes open. Namaste. Thank you for joining me. See you on the mat again soon.